So welcome. Today we are going to be talking about React Native, and this is just kind of a getting started, a quick look at setting up React Native and just starting to code mobile apps using React. Today we are going to cover what is React Native, why you should consider using React Native for your mobile development versus native development. We're going to basically go through kind of a quick start guide, a getting started approach to using React Native. We're going to look at the basics and basically build a hello world. Now, within this process, we're also going to be looking at setting up your environment. Today, primarily, we're going to be using a Mac iOS environment so that I can show you how to use iOS. So you can actually test your apps with iOS. And then in future classes, I'm going to actually port all of this over to a Raspberry Pi using Linux, and then I'll show you how to do all your development using a Linux Raspberry Pi. So let's start out by talking about what is React Native. Well, React Native is an open source mobile application framework created by Facebook. It is used to develop applications for Android, Android TV, iOS, macOS, tvOS, and so on. It can also be used for Windows and UWP by enabling developers to use React's framework along with native platform capabilities. So basically, this falls along the concepts of typical JavaScript modules or Java, where you essentially write one application and then you can deploy it to multiple devices. So first, we're going to look at what you can and cannot do, or really what you should use React Native for versus native applications. So first, let's talk about what React Native can do. Well, it can establish a platform independence. So React Native was initially, excuse me, it was initially developed by Facebook to sustain iOS. However, it now supports all the methods specific to the Android operating system. So it's just like bundling a native app with a single codebase that works on both iOS and Android platforms. Next, it's readily available reusable components. It comes with a built-in or built with reusability at its core. React Native enables you to make use of the plug and play like features corresponding to iOS and Android. This makes the app architecture consistent with the following features: responsive UI and UX capabilities, web-like style of development as compared to a hybrid framework, look, speed, and feel of the native widgets. Next, we can use it for revamped existing code base. You can apply the UI components of React Native to an app code that already exists. This is an added advantage to the business that needs to supplement an app that exists but do not want to rebuild it. Embedding React Native UI components is a quick process and does not require rewriting. Next, we have fast compilation through hot reloading. And we'll see this in today's example. Here, JavaScript is one of the fastest programming languages. It introduces another unique concept of hot reloading to provide better development experience. This feature combines the small compilation time of JavaScript and other capabilities. That means you can edit simultaneously without having to recompile your codebase. Also, React Native brings the speed and agility of web apps to the hybrid space and with the results of a native app. Now, React Native cannot, what you really should be looking at native apps when you run into these particular categories. Not fully scalable for custom modules. Now here we're talking about where React Native has not addressed all of its glitches yet. It has also it's also missing some of the custom modules, which may take a lot of your time to build, as well as to create modules of your own. You will require a specialized developer to address the technical challenges and bugs from time to time. Guarantee certainty. Well, even if Facebook has a development framework, this is an uncertainty of its performance because it still has the rights to do away with the project at any time. However, this is not likely to occur because of the technology is so popular and it has only gained more popularity over time. But again, you have to remember this is a third party tool. So if the third party decides to get rid of it, you're SOL. You have to basically go back to native. React Native is not great at handling complex UI and background processing. If your apps are more integration or intensive, then React Native might not be able to provide the best native experience. Also, apps that require a lot of background processing to work should not be built with React Native. It is even harder to get that performance benchmark for heavier apps. And finally, mitigating heavy CPU usage. React Native works on the interconnected native and JavaScript modules that combine the power of script combination and provide a native feel to the app. The higher process in highly CPU intensive applications and is a major cause of low app performance. So, when should we really use React Native to build our apps? Well, React Native should only be used for apps that fit into these categories. Typically, traditional native like apps for cross platform with lesser views, less hardware API access, budget apps, and apps that require shorter development cycles. Next, let's look at when we really need to build native apps versus React Native. Native apps should be your first choice if you have a budget that supports long term app development without compromising on specific features. For instance, fast and heavy calculations, multi threaded processing, easy and parallel updates with SDKs, strong code apps with less bugs, and apps with heavy UI and lots of animations. Now, in order to use React Native, we need some additional resources. So I've listed them here. So we need React, Node.js, Visual Studio's Code, Android SDK, and Xcode. Now, Visual Studio's Code is the only one that's kind of optional in this case because you can really use any text editor to edit your code. But Visual Studio's Code really seems to be kind of the de facto editor for React and React Native. It's just so easy to use, and you'll see that today. So let me go over these real quick so you kind of understand what each of these are. So let's start with React. So React is an open source front-end JavaScript library for building user interfaces or UI components. It is maintained by Facebook and a community of individual developers and companies. React can be used as a base in the development of single page or mobile applications. Now, in order to install React Native and to use some of its command line tools, we need to install Node.js. Node.js is an open source cross platform back-end JavaScript runtime environment that runs on Chrome version 8 engine and executes JavaScript code outside of a web browser. Now, for our editor, like I said, we're going to be using Visual Studio's Code. And Visual Studio's Code is a free source code editor made by Microsoft for Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. Its features include supporting for debugging, syntax highlighting, intelligence code compilation, snippets, code refactoring, and embedded Git. And in our case, it also has some React and React Native libraries that we can use for code editing. Next, we need our Android Software Development Environment, SDK. This is the process by which the applications are created for devices running the Android operating system. Google states that Android apps can be written using Kotlin, Java, and C++ languages. Using the Android Software Development Kit while using other languages is also possible. Now, in our case here, we aren't going to be using the Android SDK for its editor capabilities. We need the Android SDK for its visual emulators so that we can actually run a emulated Android device. And last, we have Xcode, which is Mac only. Xcode is Apple's integrated development environment for Mac OS. It's used to develop software for Mac OS, iOS, iPad, watchOS, and tvOS. It was first released in 2003, and the latest stable release is version 12.3 or 14, depending upon which device you have. And it's available via the Mac App Store free of charge for Mac OS Sur users, or even for some of the previous versions of Mac OS. Right now, Mac OS Big Sur is the latest and greatest. All right, with that, let's get started with our hands-on demo. Minimize this. Edge. All right, so the first thing we need to do is we need to get Nodes.js. So we just Google Nodes.js, and we want to go to nodesjs.org. And you can download the current or the latest LTS that's available for Node.js. You click the button, it will download via the Linux or the Windows version for your machine. You double click and you just follow the install process to install Node.js. Now I've already done this, so I'm not going to take you through the steps of these installers, but you can, if you get stuck, you can easily go to the websites and they will walk you through how to set them up. It's really straightforward. Just click continue, next, and set a destination. Once installed, we want to open up our terminal. And type in Node to make sure that it is installed. Now here we will see welcome to Node.js, and we currently have 14.15.4 installed, which is the latest LTS version. All right, Control C twice to exit out. All right, next we want to go to React Native. So we Google React Native, and it is reactnative.dev. And this is the site that you will probably spend most of your time on. It has a slew of information. Not only does it give you steps on how to install the software, it also gives you your online documentations for how to use React Native. It walks you through environment setups, which we're going to go through some of these today. It also gives you different workflows on how to run on the device. We're going to cover a few of these as well. Also, it gives you design recommendations, interactions, and so on. It also gives you the components library. So these are all the specific components you can use for building React Native apps. Things like views, text, adding images, adding text inputs, scroll views, and style, adding user interface buttons or switches, list views, and specific components for Android or iOS. And it also has some other JavaScript libraries like modals, alert boxes, status bars, and so on. And it also has a vast API of code library of things that you can actually use when building your React Native applications. And if you ever get stuck, you can always go out to the React community, read what's some of the latest news or changes that are going on in the community. And some of these have Slack channels and things like that that you can go out to and actually ask questions and get help. All right, so let's go back over to the documentation and let's go to setting up a device. So there are two ways you can actually install React Native. If you are new to development, you want to use the Expo command line interface. Otherwise, if you are already have been developing mobile apps for some time, you will want to start with the native CLI. Now, starting with the Expo versus React Native really just kind of simplifies what your project looks like. But at any given time, if you need a more complex, or your app gets more complex, or you have to do unique integration components with Android or iOS, you can easily convert your Expo app into a native CLI app. For today, we're going to focus strictly on Expo. This gets you started quickly, and you can just kind of start diving in and playing around on your local systems. So here, we're going to go out to our command line and essentially follow these steps. Go back out to terminal here. So the first thing you need to do is once you've installed Node, you're going to use npm, and we're going to do install -g expo or export CLI, and this will take just a minute to install. Now, one thing, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to redo it because it's going to come back and it's going to yell at me because I'm on a Mac and my security settings are very strict. So I need to preface this with sudo. Now, you may have the same issue on Linux. Windows is a little more forgiving. You should be able to just enter npm from the command line. Now, since I already had this installed, it just went ahead and updated one package so that I have the latest version of everything. And once it's finished, let's make sure that it's there. So we'll do npm. All right, nodes there, and Expo. There we go. And Expo is installed. You type npm, that checks to make sure node's installed, and Expo checks to see if Expo is installed. If it's not, you'll get an error, command not found.